This week's episode is all about quarterbacks, what rookies are starting, and who's the best in the league. Keep listening for all that and more.
Welcome to the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Our expert analysis on matchups and statistics will give you the edge in betting and on your friends. Use our insights to predict NFL outcomes like nobody else, and always be the smartest guy in the room.
Listen more for thoughts on Bo Nix taking the job in Denver. Is he the next John Elway? We'll let you know. Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen have separated in the QB market, but who slides in after them? And finally, where does Joe Burrow fit into all of this? Let's get going for all that and more. Welcome into the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Excited to have you with us on Thursday, August 22nd, 2 weeks away from the start of football season. I'm joined by our head of football ops, Cody Alexander, and my brother, Scott Bushka. I'm your host, Sasha Bushka. Fellas, how we feeling today?
Doing good.
I was told by a reputable source that I needed to yell into the mic for the appropriate energy to come across. So I'm gonna try to mostly yell at you guys for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah, I tried to get you started off on a good note. I called you my brother today instead of like boss or CEO or something like that. I thought that would make you happy.
It actually makes me want to yell at you more.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. We got a big show planned though. We've got a lot of news and notes around the league. It's mostly QB news, which fits nicely because we put out our QB rankings this week. So we'll get into the QB news first, and then we'll talk about our list and what came out of our threat ratings for QBs. And then we'll get out of here. We'll try to make it short and sweet for you guys. First things first, I'll start with our resident Bronco expert, actual Bronco fan in the room. Bo Nix is going to be was named the starting quarterback for the Broncos, first rookie QB since John Elway in 1983 to start the season opener for the Broncos. So I'll ask you this, Cody: is Bo Nix the next coming of John Elway?
No, but I no. There's
Elway. I'm trying to contain my laughter.
No, absolutely not. But I will say this: everybody's been giving him a hard time. Like a lot of pundits and people around the NFL have been giving a hard time, being like, "Oh, he's a check down Charlie," all this other stuff. And now I do understand like a clean pocket, ejecting out of a clean pocket, or some of the off-platform stuff that he does when he doesn't need to. I get that, but one of the things that I went and did is I looked at Sean Payton's heat map from the last time he was with the Saints. And then I took it and I looked at what Bo Nix has been asked to do in the preseason. And it is a mirror image. I think he really feels like he has the next coming of Drew Brees. Now, I don't think Bo Nix is going to be Drew Brees, but he has a guy in Cortland Sutton who can then become and transition who I think into the next slant god, Michael Thomas. So I do feel like when he took this, he has Mims who can clear vertically. He's got Sutton who can come underneath with a lot of these slants, hitches, big-bodied receiver, can catch on the sideline. And then he really wants to throw in the middle of the field, and I think it's a perfect setup for him. And what does Bo Nix do really well? Any kind of accurate throw. Where is the best place for a quarterback that's really accurate? Right in front of his face. So I do feel like he fits what Sean Payton wants to do. Do I think he's Elway? No. But do I think that he's a serviceable quarterback? Yes, I do.
Yeah. So just real quick, I thought Cody, being the ultimate football machine, football robot, was immune to rose-colored glasses for his own team. Now we know that's not true.
That's not true at all. I didn't say you.
I listened to that whole thing. Other than I was impressed by the fact that Cody's heat mapping Bo Nix and Drew Brees on top of each other. Excellent data work there. But the whole thing sounded to me like a Broncos, it was like a giddy Broncos fan thinking that they found a franchise quarterback. I also was like, when you said slant god, I'm like, is he gonna say Michael Thomas or is he gonna say Marquez Colston? He could go with either.
Another good one. Late round find too.
Did Michael Thomas? He hasn't been signed by anyone, has he? You think he'll find a team before the season, or is he riding off into the sunset?
I think it's one of those deals where, he just hasn't been healthy. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things that you haven't really played in the last 2 years. And he's probably asking for a wild contract. I mean, he played 10 games last year, only started 7. The year before he was at 3. He hasn't played in 3 years. I mean, really the last time that he finished the season fully was 2019 when he had that crazy year when he went off for 1,700 yards. So if you really think about it, he hasn't even produced in the last 4 years. In the NFL, if you haven't produced in at least 2, you're pretty much done.
The Broncos could just go out and sign the real Michael Thomas, but I digress. Drake May, another rookie QB in a battle.
Yeah. Hey, Sasha, just before we leave Bo Nix, Cody, I do not disagree with you whatsoever I think he's about as pro ready as as someone coming out of college is going to be. He actually started 5 years, started the most games ever because of the COVID year for a starting quarterback in college. And I think he's in the perfect offense with Sean Payton. So I would not be surprised at all if Bo Nix is a serviceable quarterback. I just don't think we know yet. Sure, in the preseason, when teams are playing cover 3, cover 2, not mixing anything up, and are plenty happy to give you 5 and 7-yard throws underneath, cool. Bo Nix can do that. It's actually what he's made to do. I just what's going to happen in the season when teams are like, all right, we're going to get up, we're going to press these receivers, we're going to hit them off the line. You're not going to have a 5-yard throw, and if Nix wants to move the ball, he's going to have to make some big boy throws down the field. That's what I do. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying, I don't know if we've seen that yet.
Yeah, and that's 100% accurate. I mean, I think that he's exactly what Peyton wants, but he will have to prove that he's an add value. He's going to add value somewhere. Either he's just cool, calm, and collected when he gets pressure because people are gonna blitz a rookie quarterback. It's just gonna happen. And then can he throw a deep ball? Can he get the ball down the field? We don't want a Chad Pennington where everything is underneath 10 yards. That's not necessarily what we want to bring an old quarterback to. But I think that he can be what they want. His profile matches exactly what Peyton wants. So, and we talk a lot of times, especially in football, it's the fit, and especially at quarterback, finding a fit, being in the right offense. So I think that he's in the right fit, but again, he's a rookie quarterback and he's going to have to prove it.
So just real quick to stick on this Bo Nix thing. He was the 6th out of the 6 quarterbacks taken in the first 12 picks. I don't want to get crazy. If Sean Payton had the first pick, he's taking Caleb Williams. But if he had the 3rd pick, let's say Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are off the board just like it went, do you think Bo Nix was the guy he really wanted anyways?
I think you could probably argue JJ McCarthy was in the mix as well for that, just because they fit kind of the same profile. Drake May kind of has a live arm. I don't know. I think really after the first 2 quarterbacks, it was just, who do you like better? Who do you think fits in with what you are? I mean, Jaden Daniels was essentially just a video game quarterback last year, and he kind of bloomed last year. And then obviously Caleb Williams, in his skill set, he looks like the next coming of Patrick Mahomes. I mean, anybody you talk to, that's going to be his comp, whether it's fair or not. So I think after that, it was just fit, and I think Nix fell right to him, and they ended up taking him.
Yeah, and you mentioned Drake May there. He's competing with Jacoby Brissett for the starting job in New England. They did just name, and everybody already assumed this anyways, Jaden Daniels, the starter in Washington. Do you think Drake May gets that week 1 start for New England ahead of Jacoby Brissett?
I don't know why you don't. I like Brissett, and Brissett's a quality backup, but I feel like nowadays you have to, because of the way contract structures are, you got to use your quarterback and you got to use them early.
Yeah. I don't I think I agree, Cody. There's definitely people try to act like there's a right answer. There is definitely no right answer in terms of QBs starting right away or QBs sitting a year. Sasha, you put out an article yesterday. Cody, you put out an article today. Everyone knows that Mahomes and Allen are head and shoulders, essentially. like above everyone else in the league. Mahomes sat a year and learned under Alex Smith, and Josh Allen got thrown in the fire as a rookie. He kind of sucked, but he used that advantage to like have like grow a ton and have an amazing second year. So two best guys in the league. There's no takeaway. To me, if I'm the Patriots, I'm just asking the question of like, what are we trying to gain by starting Jacoby Brissett? Best case scenario, you start Jacoby Brissett and you win 7 games because he's a serviceable quarterback and you have a worse draft pick. Like, I just don't get the upside in doing that versus saying we're going to let May learn for 17 games.
I really think it comes down to maturity, and that's something that we just don't know because we're not in the locker room, and it comes down to the coaches of just being like, "Hey, can they handle it?" I saw, I think it was Hard Knocks where Saban was talking about Caleb Williams with Eberflus, because Eberflus played for Saban, and talking about how Peyton Manning threw like 1 million interceptions. I think he set the rookie record for interceptions, but it never bothered him. Like, everything was a learning process. They knew he was going to grow. Kind of like the same mentality you talk about Josh Allen. You know, Mahomes was in a different situation. Like, people forget, like, Mahomes was a first round talent, but it was more or less like nobody knew because he was coming from Cliff Kingsbury's offense. He was coming from Tech, where they were basically in a shootout. He was kind of a gunslinger. He was kind of in that same mold. They had a really good quarterback in Alex Smith. So I'm with you, Scott. Like, what are you gaining by not playing Drake May?
Yeah, but Cody, the Chiefs had something to lose with like that year that Mahomes was a rookie, right? Like, they were a playoff team the year before. They were a playoff team that in 2017, which was his rookie year. They traded up to get Mahomes, and so they had something to lose by starting him. So why not sit him? The Bills weren't in that situation with Allen. I just don't think the Patriots are either with Brissett.
Yeah. And on top of this, something to lose, Alex Smith had the best season of his career the year Mahomes sat. So if that wouldn't have gone well and the Chiefs were out of the playoff, like, he would have come in at some point during the year. But Alex Smith was playing so well, you couldn't take him out. And they still moved off of him after the first season. So, like, they moved off of him basically as soon as they possibly could.
Right.
Yeah. Well, if I'm not mistaken, that was the year that the Chiefs like inexplicably lost to the Titans in the first round of the playoffs, which I think probably made it easier for us to be like, okay, there's clearly a wall we're hitting, and we've got this first round talent sitting over here, so like, let's just move on. But if you go back to video when they made that decision, there was a lot of people who thought it was stupid and very risky.
Yeah. It wasn't that year, but I'm sure you remember, Scott, the year that the Chiefs blew like a 45-10 lead to the Colts. That was a lot of fun.
I think you were in Portland and we watched that game together at On Deck Sports Bar and Grill. And yes, I remember like increasingly feeling like I had to drink more like as that lead shrunk.
Yeah, I don't know if I should like finish the story, but yeah, essentially there were some jabronis in the bar that day that decided it would be a good idea to root for the Colts, and it did not make us happy. Just real quick, we were talking Drake May and like whether rookies started on stuff. Drake May was the presumed number 2 pick all the way until like the actual draft process started. But like all last year, it was like Caleb Williams, Drake May. These guys are 1-2. And then Jaden Daniels, as Cody said, has this video game type season. Is there is one season enough to justify going over a guy who's presumed number 1? And then also, why did that seems like it happens a lot where a guy is like presumed into a certain spot. I think of Justin Fields the year Trevor Lawrence came out. And then when people really dig in, somebody else ends up going number 2. It doesn't seem like anybody ever moves off of like the presumed number 1, like a Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams, Andrew Luck. But that number 2 spot seems to change a lot.
I really think with LSU's situation, it was you're playing in the SEC versus the ACC. And so you go and you look at May, he struggled. He had lost a lot of production in the several years leading up to obviously the year that he was drafted. You know, so he wasn't the dynamic player that kind of people thought he was when they went in the tape. I mean, and I say all this, he still is a top 5 pick, but I think with Jaden Daniels, just like you did that in the SEC, The SEC already knows, like we already know the quality. People also forget, like what there were also like 3 receivers from LSU drafted this year as well. So I mean, I think that that's kind of the caveat with that. I think with what ends up happening is like it's the like you go back and you look at lineage, right? Well, Burrow had kind of the same setup, and he had a bunch of receivers that are now really productive in the NFL. And so his passes kind of mean a little bit more because it was in the SEC. It was with NFL receivers. You can kind of project that better. Whereas you go with May and the projection is, man, he's getting confused by some of these really simple defenses. He doesn't look as good. It's in the ACC. I don't feel really good about it. And I think that's where you get the slide a little bit. I also think Kingsbury wants a guy that can just kind of run around. I think him having Kyler Murray and then seeing Jaden Daniels, he's just thinking of Jaden Daniels as almost like a taller, kind of more NFL ready Kyler Murray.
Yeah. I think, well, that's 100% right about Kingsbury. The thing that I think people overestimate all the time is the whole like lineage and similar situation comparisons that they do with quarterbacks. Because it's like, sure, Burrow was a one-hit wonder at LSU. He had great receivers. He played with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. They won a national championship, which is maybe an important point.
Mm-hmm.
Jane Daniels did the same thing. So, like, all of a sudden, Jane Daniels is going to be Joe Burrow. Like, people made the same mistake with CJ Stroud. They're like, well, he went to Ohio State. None of these Ohio State quarterbacks have panned out. Justin Fields sucks, and he was really great at Ohio State, so CJ Stroud must suck. And we should take Bryce Young over him because he went to Alabama, and Tua did good at Alabama, and like actually none of that shit matters.
Right.
Sorry, listeners, for using the word shit. So yeah, I think people read into that a little too much.
Well, and I think you bring up 2 great examples. Justin Fields and CJ Stroud were not even the same player. Like if you watched CJ Stroud and you walked away and said he was not the best quarterback in that draft class, I don't know what you were watching. I think the problem with Stroud was he was so calm and collected. I thought he was so good, he was almost boring. So when you watched him, his progressions, the way he worked, he never did. There wasn't anything flashy. The problem with him is like Caleb Williams is still playing football at the same time. And then you have these other guys that are like, oh, they're so flashy. But then CJ Stroud is just dropping dimes to NFL receivers. And so I think that was the other part with him. And then you go look at Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow. They're not even the same player. And what they did
right.
was
not even close.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to let you finish. To Scott's point about like the QB comps from one school to another and all of that. We don't have time to do this exercise right here today, but if you really go through it, and I've done it before with other people, you'd be hard pressed to find a college that has more than 2 good quarterbacks that have ever come from it. And most it stops at 1. So the point is like these guys come from all different places. So
Right.
to compare one situation to the other, just because a quarterback went to the same school doesn't really make any sense.
100%.
It's a great point.
Yeah. Real quick, to move off the rookies for a second, Deshaun Watson is missing practice with general arm soreness. We haven't seen Deshaun Watson be good in quite some time now. Just like he missed like 2 full seasons. Then he came back at the end of the suspension season, didn't do much last year. Are we ever going to see even, I won't say like vintage Deshaun Watson, because I don't think we'll ever see that again. Are we ever going to see even like 80% of the peak of what we saw from Deshaun Watson in a Browns uniform?
Man, it's kind of the same thing we hit on it with like Michael Thomas at the beginning, is like you really haven't had anything productive in 3 years. And I think that there's a lot of social pressure outside as well that he's dealing with just because of his situation. And I think quarterback is probably one of the, if not the most difficult positions to just come back from. I mean, if you really haven't played in 3 years, you haven't been able to finish. Here, and you're correct. Like he was really good before all of this mess started in Houston. And I think the contracts that weighs on him, the fans weigh on him, the outside noise weighs, and just I don't think we will ever see what the 2020 Deshaun Watson that we all kind of thought, okay, this kid's going to be really, really good.
Yeah, I think that answer is unequivocally no. I mean, he is so far away from vintage Deshaun Watson that it's not even close. And like Cody, I thought the same thing as you. Is when we talked about Michael Thomas not being productive for 4 years, I immediately thought of Deshaun Watson. The thing that's interesting is the fact that he can't seem to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Right? It's like he couldn't stay healthy last year. There was always something going on with shoulder soreness or elbow soreness, and then we hear the same thing this year. And I almost wonder if there's some type of science behind, like when you're an athlete that is like as elite as these guys, and you are training and playing and going through weekly recovery on a weekly basis. It seems to me that when guys sit out, when guys don't participate for a couple years, it's almost like when their bodies come back, they can't they can't handle doing it again, because it seems like Deshaun Watson, even if he was able to come back and perform at the level he was, like his body won't let him do it.
Yeah. And I think with him, that's it. I mean, we had him as the number 3 in threat rate in 2020, and then it's just you fall off a cliff. And I agree with you. Like the longer that you don't go and you don't participate, the more prone to injury you are going to be, because you're only getting older. Everybody in the NFL is getting younger, and then you're not producing. I just think like the whole stress of everything, it just really weighs on some of these players.
Yeah, and if anyone believes in karma, like if you don't wear a Browns helmet on Sunday to watch football, you're really probably not rooting for Deshaun Watson to get back to form. So speaking of quarterbacks that, or at least one quarterback that was once better than he is now, Pittsburgh has a QB situation. You've got Justin Fields, who's never really performed in the NFL outside of being a good fantasy football player. And then Russell Wilson, who people still think is a Hall of Famer and at one point was considered one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but had 2 awful years in Denver. And they got them both for almost nothing, and it's starting to look like there was a reason for that.
Yeah, I wrote about this earlier in the week, Sasha, but to me, like, this is the classic Dennis Green coaching. I can't remember if it was the Vikings or the Arizona Cardinals at this point. Like, they are who we thought they are.
Yes.
And we like they're. I don't know why we wouldn't have expected the Steelers quarterback situation to look like this as they've started the trip. Like, there's a reason they got both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields for basically nothing. Justin Fields has never been very good, to your point, other than a fantasy quarterback. And Russell Wilson has been degrading as a player, definitely for the last couple of years in Denver, but also in his last couple of years in Seattle, right? And it's a little bit of the Deshaun Watson, like he's 4 years from when we saw peak Russell Wilson. So to expect that player to come back, I think is unrealistic.
Well, and 2, I think, why would he have chosen to go there with Arthur Smith there, who doesn't really want to throw anything outside? Everything's kind of in the middle. It's based off run, play, action, and then you're going to go there, and that's what you're going to do. And if you look at it, I mean, Scott, you're correct. Like in 2019, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And then in 2020, he's still serviceable, but it's a little bit lower. And then he hasn't even broken like 200 raw threat rate, like our point that we use. He hasn't even broken 200, which 200 would put you at pretty much like you're an above average quarterback. You're right there in the middle. If you're ranking all 32, you're like right in the middle. He hasn't even been able to break that. So he's actually below average. And to me, that's kind of, as we go further from this, Pete Carroll looks like an absolute genius. And that deal that they did with the Broncos looks as one of the worst trades, of all time, for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy when the cliff comes. It's hard to recover from that, and Russell Wilson hasn't been good in a while. There's no reason to think he's going to be really good now. I saw some people saying on social media the Steelers just went from one bad quarterback to two bad quarterbacks, which doesn't really help you. So that's kind of the stuff that's top of mind with news. On the other side, we'll get into rankings, talk about some better quarterbacks, hopefully, and some non-rookie quarterbacks. You're listening to the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. We'll be right back.
Use our insights to predict NFL outcomes like nobody else and always be the smartest guy in the room.
Welcome back into the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. We're taking a look at QBs during QB week. In case anyone was wondering, Deshaun Watson comes in at number 41 in our threat ratings. But we're going to gander our way back up towards the top of the list. According to threat ratings, Josh Allen actually came in as the number one QB in the league with Patrick Mahomes at 2. Scott, I'll let you talk a little bit about parsing those two guys out and why threat ratings might have favored Allen in this scenario.
Two things about threat ratings. The first is that they're based on actual production on the field, and we've cut this a million different ways. Like if you look at EPA generated in the regular season or the playoffs, like Mahomes and Josh Allen are head and shoulders by a really wide margin ahead of everyone else. And so they're the best two quarterbacks in the league. The other thing that threat ratings do is they more heavily weight the most recent seasons, which they should, right? Because as we just talked about with Deshaun Watson, with Michael Thomas, with Russell Wilson, like especially in football, performance in recent seasons matters. And it's that particular reason, which is why, like, I think at this point in time, threat ratings would put Josh Allen over Patrick Mahomes, solely because he had quite a bit stronger 2023 than Mahomes did, which we know it was a down year. Down year is all relative for the Chiefs, right? A, they won the Super Bowl. B, even though everyone hated their offense, they were 8th overall in DVOA. So the worst possible year for Mahomes and the Chiefs offense is 8th in DVOA. But it stands to reason that Allen did have a better 2023 than Patrick Mahomes. The other thing that's going into this, which I think is undisputable, is that threat rate takes into account passing and using your legs. No one is quite a machine at doing both like Allen is, right? Like he's basically a running back and a quarterback. And what we all know about Mahomes is that like when he needs to in the Super Bowl, he can be really effective with his legs, but he doesn't do it all the time for 17 games a season.
Yeah. Another quick point about threat ratings that actually, if you just looked at like 2023 production in the regular season, Mahomes actually could have slid a little bit further down the list. But a couple of things about threat ratings that I really like when it comes to QBs is, one, we're trying to disassociate as much as possible, because positions are dependent on each other, QB performance from wide receiver performance. So the fact that Mahomes' receivers were hot garbage last year actually helped his threat ratings, and you didn't see any. Travis Kelce was our number one tight end, but you didn't see any Chiefs receivers even sniffing the top 20 in threat ratings on that side. And then also there is some accounting for like threat produced in the postseason was taken into account. So the Chiefs got it together, had a really good postseason, had the longest run, played the most postseason games. So that helped Mahomes climb the list some there as well.
Yeah. Not only, Sasha, did you not see a Chiefs receiver sniff the top 20? The first Chiefs receiver was Rashee Rice, checked in at number 67, which means on average, the other 31 teams everyone had 2 better receivers than the Chiefs had 1. So yeah, that definitely matters. The only thing, and I think we should let Cody hop in here. The only thing I will say, which feels like obligatory quarterback list has to be said, is not only am I a lifelong Chiefs fan, but I'm also not stupid, or at least I don't think I'm stupid. Like Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. He just is. And like when you factor in performance, what he does on the field, hit results, like playoff performance, He's won 3 Super Bowls. He's won the last 2. He's been in 3 out of 5. He's been at 4, won 4 out of 6 AFC championships. Like, he's the best quarterback, and he's beat Allen in the playoffs many of those years. So, like, I just want to get that out of the way. But when we're talking about threat ratings and pure production and the versatility of that production, you can make an argument that it's Mahomes and Allen and everyone else is a distant third.
Yeah, and I think, like, to go on top of that, like, when you use these in the way that we have done this, and this was the whole point of creating this, was to actually give better insight into how these quarterbacks are playing. We all know, like, Mahomes and Allen are the top 2. I think the most important one that I would like to talk about, because I'm from Dallas, I hear about it all the time. Dak Prescott is a good quarterback, and he's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. And the fact that he hasn't won any playoff games, I totally get it. You know, the only difference probably between him and somebody like a Dan Marino is, like, Dan Marino, his rookie year, went to a Super Bowl. Now, I'm not comparing Dak Prescott to Dan Marino, but what I'm saying is, when you look at production and you look at the way that he's playing, like, you can't sit there and go away and say, oh, he shouldn't get paid by the Dallas Cowboys. He should 100% get paid by the Dallas Cowboys. He should be a top 5 quarterback on almost everybody's list. And so, for the fact that we're even sitting here with the 2 weeks away from the season, and Dak Prescott, we're talking about, should Dak Prescott get a contract? He 100% should get a contract. And if he hits free agency, somebody is backing up the Brinks truck for him.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the key to the whole thing is, I don't think Dak Prescott wants a contract. He's going to be like the first true quarterback free agent that, like, people actually want in a very long time. And there's no telling what somebody will pay for that. The question becomes is, like, are the Dallas Cowboys in that bidding war? And if they end up in that bidding war for him next year, they obviously made a mistake not signing him ahead of time, but who knows, like, what he's turned down based on the fact that he wants to be. His agent did a great job because he got him a no tag clause, a no trade clause. So that gave him the ability to play this all the way out in free agency.
100%.
Yeah.
There's a log jam now in Dallas of contracts. CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, and now him. Guys, we're talking like a huge percentage of your contracts and your salary cap is going to be taken up by those 3 players. They're going to have to make a choice with one of them. And I just have this weird feeling that Dak Prescott is going to be the odd man out in this, which I think is just completely insane in the modern game.
Yeah. I mean, if the Cowboys let Dak Prescott walk, it's corporate malpractice. Quite frankly, like, and we've talked about this before, I think the way the Cowboys have dealt with those 3 big stars is corporate malpractice, because, like, everyone knows in the modern NFL, when dudes are transformational talents, you try to extend them as early as possible.
100%.
Because salary cap's rising, new deals raise the floor. Like, the earlier you can sign someone, the cheaper you get them for, right? And so, I mean, the only thing I would say about Dak Prescott is, Sasha, I agree with you. Like, we don't know what he's been offered, and he could have turned down some really good offers, and quite frankly, like, he's bet on himself, and it's worked because he knows he's freaking good. You know what I mean?
So let me ask this though. We've kind of agreed, and we're gonna get to another guy that I think people want to talk about, Joe Burrow, here in a little bit. But we've kind of agreed that Allen and Mahomes, in terms of production and everything you see on the field, are head and shoulders above everyone else. Our threat ratings do have Dak Prescott number 3. I think there's a lot of argument to be had after those first 2. So how do you parse out, like, that next tier of quarterbacks? And according to our threat ratings, that's Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud are the next 5 guys on the list. Is there somebody outside of those 5 that should be in there? And then who's the best of those 5 guys?
Well, I mean, the article I just wrote, I'll start. Lamar Jackson, obviously, like, to me, is the number 3 quarterback. Now, he does so much with his legs that it almost supersedes what he does as a passer. He really, if you look at it analytically and you look at the numbers and you look at performance, he really is an average passer. But when you add his legs, especially in design runs, in our threat rate, He's got 16 points of raw threat in design runs. I think the next closest person to him is like 3 points. I mean, that's just insane of how much value he adds when running. Yeah, Justin Fields is the next closest person to him. So I think for me, he's such a unique specimen in terms of like what he does on the field compared to everybody else. He truly is, if you really think about it, if we're going to be like the unicorn alien thing that we've been doing, he really is a unicorn. Like there is really no one else. He is what we wanted Michael Vick to be, in all honesty. We wanted somebody who was essentially a running back, but then he could also throw at a really high level, and he's really, real good passer. And he's also an elite deep throw passer. It's just, I just think he's been kind of hampered with the offense for the past couple of years. And then last year, you're kind of easing into it. I'm really interested to see what he does this year. I think another person that people don't talk about enough is the transformation of Jared Goff. We talk about the transformation of Josh Allen, but nobody talks about the transformation of Jared Goff. It used to be, okay, well, if you blitz Jared Goff, he can't handle it. He's number 2 in our threat rate against the blitz. So, I mean, to me, that's kind of been the thing with him. Those two in particular, I think are like, that's your Mount Rushmore right there, at least for me right now.
Yeah, I agree with Cody on Lamar Jackson. I don't agree as much on Jared Goff. But to me, like if you're talking about these elite tiers of quarterbacks, which quarterback is the one position, maybe not just in the NFL, but like in all of sports, where like you could argue it's the most important position in all of sports, and there's a massive percentage of the team's success that hangs on their shoulders. But the thing about Mahomes and Allen, and I would argue Lamar Jackson, when he like caveat when he's healthy, is that like the floor of their team is so high. Yes. When those three guys are playing, and it's because they do unique things that other people can't do, right? And for Lamar, that it's certainly the case that he's you said he was a unicorn, right, Cody? He's an absolute unicorn in terms of the dynamic that he brings to the running game when he's in there. And so I think he's the only one that you can make the argument that he's such a unique talent, that he could be in that tier of Mahomes and Allen, Mahomes and Allen. As you start to get into all these other guys, like I think there's a couple different group. There's one group which I would put in the category of a little bit of like system quarterbacks. And I throw Goff in that category. I also throw Purdy in that category. And Purdy has the potential, I think, to, like, say Ayuk were to walk and Debo's aging, and all of a sudden his receivers and the players around him aren't quite as good, and he still has an elite season, like then people start to talk about him in a different way, right? Then there's a group of young guys, Stroud, Jordan Love, maybe Trevor Lawrence, who people think have the potential to get in that top tier, but we've got to see more of them, right? That's like, we talked about threat rating again, but like threat rating, it requires you to do it year after year after year and be consistent. And then the last group of people I would put in there are dudes that have either been in that elite category or touched that elite category before, but are over their hill or past their prime. And I put Aaron Rodgers in that category. I would throw Stafford in that category, not as much, right? But I think Stafford is, he's certainly past his prime. He's maybe not far away from his peak, but he's not in that elite category. And the dude that's kind of an enigma, that everyone's going to want to talk about, and I'm sure people will hammer us when he's not in our top 10, is Joe Burrow. Right. But there's two things with Joe Burrow. One, his performance hasn't been consistent. That's primarily due to injuries, right? So he's had an epic year, and he had really epic years in 21 and 22. He's had other years last year that weren't great, primarily injury fueled. But also, we talked about how threat rating takes into account the quality of receivers. And he has been blessed with two number one really dynamic receivers and a third, although he doesn't have him this year, in Tyler Boyd. So I do not put Burrow in that number 3 slot, and our ratings don't put Burrow in that number 3 slot like I think a lot of other people do.
Yeah. And one thing to look at on Burrow when it comes to threat is like, first of all, his raw threat in 21 and 22, which were really his 2 good years, they were really high, like top 5 type numbers. It's just last year he was injured, and threat doesn't count for that and breaks stuff down into per game and things like that. But when he was on the field, he wasn't good. He came into
Right.
the year with a calf injury and played through it and wasn't really good for the first 4 or 5 games, started to get into his groove, and then went out with a wrist injury and didn't play the rest of the year. And threat rates the most recent seasons the most. And so that's why he's not in there. The other thing to look at is like, 2 things people look at on quarterbacks is like production. Basically, how good are you? Like on a week to week basis, do you help your team win games? But then the other thing is just like the overall winning in postseason success. And Mahomes has both in spades. Allen is close. Like he hasn't gone to a Super Bowl, obviously, but he's had some playoff wins. But then when you look at the other guys, they have one or the other. You have like Lamar Jackson, you're saying like he's got the skill set. He's got his teams win a ton of games every year. He just hasn't had postseason success. And then Burrow, he's really only had 1 or 2 really good regular seasons, but he made that Super Bowl in his second year. So people wanted to throw him up in that category as the ultimate like winner type guy. But that one season doesn't do it. Like he's going to have to go back to a Super Bowl at some point, or that shine of that second season going to a Super Bowl is going to wear off eventually.
I think
For
two
sure.
guys to think about and have kind of been failed by their teams is a guy like Trevor Lawrence, and then someone who we haven't even mentioned yet in Justin Herbert, of just like the defense for the Jaguars last year just completely collapsed, right? But the year before, they won a playoff game. They went to the second round. Everybody's like, okay, here we go. They have a great first half, and then they fail. And then who gets the blame? It's Trevor Lawrence. It's Trevor Lawrence's fault, even though the defense completely just stunk it up in the last half of the year. And then you have a guy like Justin Herbert who does the same thing. He's playing under a defensive head coach. He has 2 really good years in 21 and 22, struggled through last year, which that was a mess all in of itself last year with, just everything going on, and just under Kellen Moore just wasn't very successful. So to me, I think those are 2 guys that one, we have a guy in Jim Harbaugh who's a former quarterback. He understands quarterbacks. I think that I love Jesse Minter. I think the defense is going to be 100% better. That's a team that will be better. But the problem is, again, you're in the same division as Patrick Mahomes. But I think Trevor Lawrence has an opportunity to really right the ship. And then the last guy that I would mention that I think can easily move up into the Mount Rushmore if they can have another good year is CJ Stroud. Because if CJ Stroud has another year like he did last year, we need to start talking about him as being an elite quarterback in this league.
I would be Cody. Cody and Sasha. Sorry, there is so much hype around the Texans, and I think it's for good reason. I am as excited as their defense and the improvement that they could show there, which helps a ton, as I am about their offense and what they can do with Stephon Diggs back and Tank Dell and all that stuff. There's just something about my spidey sense, and maybe it's because I've been deep in like coverage graphs with you for the last 6 months. There's something about my spidey sense that tells me that CJ Stroud saw a lot of vanilla coverages last year, and I think he saw some of the highest percentage of cover 3 in the league. Some of that's because Gus Bradley's in his division, but I also just think my sense is that he's going to see him and Bobby Slowick are going to see an adjustment coming from the league, and they're going to be like, okay, this dude is good. We're not just going to let him. We're not just going to let him carve us up, for 60 minutes a game. And I think he's going to have to be adjusting on the fly in games a lot. And I'm just thinking back a lot to the 2021 season for the Chiefs, where you could almost like see Mahomes mid-game, like trying to process the weird stuff that defenses were doing to him. And I'm wondering out loud if Stroud's due for a bit of a regression because of that.
It's definitely a possibility. They also have added some things on the team. Like they added Daniil Hunter. Their defense should be better. Stephon Diggs could help. And they're going to hit the ground running with a lot of confidence this year. I don't think anybody knew what to expect from the Texans last year, and it took a while they were 0-2, I believe. And so it took them a while to hit their stride, get in their groove. So just based on that alone, they could still win the same number of games as they did last year, 10. And then if Stroud doesn't regress, it could go up to 11, 12 and be one of the top teams in the league. One of the things we've been doing with the other positions is going through like potential breakout stars and things like that. The quarterback position right now is kind of interesting in the league. Obviously, we have the rookies, and we talked a lot about the rookies during the news and notes, so I don't really want to get into that. But there's really, and I can only think of one, but there's almost no quarterbacks in the league right now that you're saying, like, we could see marked improvement from that guy. Like, he could be a lot better than he's been in the past because they're either, like, everyone we know is either good or bad, and we kind of know what they are, except a guy going into his second year, Bryce Young. Could we see him take any kind of a jump? Because he didn't look like he could be an NFL quarterback last year.
Yeah, he's an interesting case. And I think the defense is set up for success there. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to elevate that. That's also a division that's very, very winnable. And everybody's kind of restocked and ready to go. I mean, I agree with you last year. He just did not look comfortable. He didn't look like he really was very good. He looked small. And I know everybody's like, oh, but he's the same size as Kyler Murray. And I would suggest that you go and watch Kyler Murray play. That guy can run and is as fast as anybody in the NFL. So comparing him to Kyler Murray because of the stature kind of lazy, and he's more of a pocket passer than he is a runner.
Kyler Murray also has a lot thicker lower half. Like
yes,
if you're talking about injury
100%.
concern and all of that.
Right.
Yeah. Kyler Murray is a generational athlete. Only dude ever in the history of the world to be drafted in the top 10 in the MLB and the NFL. Right? Like he is and I agree with Sasha's point, like a lot thicker lower half, a lot thicker all around. I don't see it for Bryce Young, and there is no amazing analysis here other than like when I watch him on film, he looks small. He looks like so easily taken down, like in the pocket, and his arm, like to me, his arm strength, like I just don't see the zip on the ball that I see with some of these other elite quarterbacks. It's interesting, Cody, that you brought up Kyler Murray, because Sasha, when you ask that question of like, is there a quarterback that could take a big jump? Like I thought about Kyler Murray because there was a time, and that time was 2020, where he had 270 raw havoc score, which would have been certainly top 10, close to top 5 in our 2020 totals. He had a 239 havoc score in 2021, and then he dropped off a cliff. A lot of that was due to injury. But he's someone who in that 2020, 2021 range, we would have said, like, is this guy is infringing on being a top 10, being elite quarterback. And then we kind of forgot about him. He's got some new toys this year, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. So I think him and the Cardinals in general are just someone to watch out for.
Yeah. From a fantasy perspective, for sure. We don't talk a lot about fantasy, but like Kyler Murray's a game changer there. And like he puts up numbers for sure. The question that people are going to have about Kyler Murray is it going to result in wins for the Cardinals? And the Cardinals could be a lot better this year. So we'll have to watch out for that. It's a good QB conversation, guys. I'm going to close this out here in a second. Anything you want to add for the people before we sign off?
I'll piggyback on Scott. If you are not aware of what's going on offensively and defensively in the desert in Arizona, then I would suggest that you go and watch them. They're not talent rich on defense. They have two of the best safeties in the NFL, though. But their scheme is so bizarre compared to everybody else in the NFL. They run quarters almost 60% of the time. They use a lot of 5-man fronts with one linebacker. They're moving safeties all around. In fact, it almost looks collegiate in the way that they do it. But then offensively, They're doing some really cool things in the run game. And I'm now with Kyler Murray fully healthy, fully in a year. I think that they have a potential. There's always that one team that you're just like, where did they come from? I think that they have potential to win 9, maybe even 10 games just because nobody's really prepared for them.
Yeah. That team was the Texans last year.
Yes.
Yeah. As our good friends over at the Ringer, Sheil Kapadia would say, the Cardinals are 100% the crown jewel for the football hipsters in 2024.
Yeah.
And Cody would 100% qualify as a football hipster, although he needs to grow out a mustache a little bit more.
No, it would look so cheesy. It would look like just a bunch of fuzz. So no, we're not doing that.
All right, fair enough. That's going to do it for the matchup by Field Vision Sports. Scott looks like he has something to say.
That's the good thing about being brothers is you don't even have to say something, and Sasha knew that I had something to say. Hey, I just wanted to say this. I am excited because this podcast is called The Matchup, and I think, and the boss Sasha will correct me if I'm wrong, like I think next week we're going to start getting into talking about some matchups. Probably Chiefs-Ravens, first game of the season. When we record this next week, we'll be a week out from that game, which is freaking awesome. And so I'm excited because I think people are going to start to see this podcast transition into talking about rankings and the theory of who can be good into like getting into the guts of on-field matchups between teams, which quite frankly is what our company is geared to be amazing at. So I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. 2 weeks until football season. Check us out on X at Field Vision MI. Check us out on the gram at Field Vision Sports. We're on TikTok as well. FieldVisionSports.com to check out the blog. And the app will be launching in less than 2 weeks. And that'll be available in the App Store. So we'll be looking for you there. You've been listening to the matchup by Field Vision Sports. We'll see you next time. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. We appreciate you joining the movement that is Field Vision Sports, the analytics platform built specifically for you, the fan. We look forward to taking you through this football season and beyond. And be sure to tell all your friends.